Hello and welcome to another video that is going to get you the very top grades, even though, or perhaps because, it focuses on just 5 key quotations. You can't possibly write much more than that in the exam, and so revising just using 5 quotations is going to get you the top grades. Let me show you how. Today's quotation, as usual, will come from the beginning of the poem. Then we'll have some violent imagery from the middle of the poem. We'll consider the effects on the speaker and then the ending. That's it, 5 quick quotations. As usual, I will be taking you through the FOSS way, the structure that is guaranteed to get you at least a grade 7. And that's not an idle boast, it's not a lie, it's the absolute truth. Because understanding form gets you into the grade 7 and structure starts at grade 6. And during the video, I'll also show you that it's a pretty good choice to revise this poem because there are only 5 sorts of questions you can get asked about power and conflict. It will either be about the effects on people or places, conflict during war, power and conflict in nature, and the past compared to the present or future. And this poem hits 4 of those. The one that it's weak on is nature, although at a push you could do it. I'm not going to cover that in this video because it is rather difficult. But you will get 4 out of 5. Okay, we always want to start with form because that's in the grade 7 criteria, and often we'll be able to comment about the form during the opening. So the dramatic form of this poem is a monologue, and we begin in media res. That means in the middle of the action. Here it's in the middle of a conversation where a soldier is telling somebody who's presumably interviewing them, perhaps a psychiatrist or perhaps a reporter. On another occasion we got sent out. Now what's important about this is that we realise this is an incident that has had a great effect on the soldier, but it's actually only one of many. Another inference we can make is that he's been building up to this one. This is the occasion that he hasn't wanted to face because it has had the worst psychological effect on him, and therefore he saved it till last. Then we have this passive language here, we got sent out. Now in a school setting, of course, this is like a dismissal. You were sent away. And it's interesting that this language choice is used for being deployed. So we're being deployed in war. Sounds now not like a job of the soldier, but an actual punishment. I got excluded. I got sent out. So we can infer from this that war is a kind of expulsion, a kind of exclusion. And psychologically, that's what's going to happen to this soldier. He's going to be expelled from his own identity, excluded from it. This moment in the poem is going to dramatically affect him psychologically. Now hopefully you're making notes during the video and you've noted down that it is in the form of a monologue and that we interrupt the speaker in media res, which means in mid-flow if you like. Right, in our next quotation, I see every round as it rips through his life. We're going to start talking about the structure. So we've got this dramatic pause here after the word swear. So there's an ironic double meaning to the word swear here, and we can imagine him cursing himself as he remembers this memory. This is the turning point, and obviously we can say that's why this gap appears here and we get this new stanza. It represents a turning point. Hopefully you'll remember the word for that. The turning point in a sonnet is called a volta, so we see that in Ozymandias, and the examiners will be happy for us to use this term to refer to the turning point here. We've got the structural technique here where he moves from we, collective responsibility, to I. He's now starting to blame himself, and that is the turn, the volta. This is emphasized by the harsh alliteration of round and rips, and also by the metaphor that it's not just attacking this victim, it's ripping through his life. It is utterly destructive. So we see this happening in the present tense as well, because when the soldier imagines it in retrospect, it stays in his mind. He can't get rid of this memory. It's always in the present. It's always now. And Armitage quite subtly uses the word round here instead of bullet. A round does mean a bullet, of course, but it also gives us the idea of circularity, which is what's happening in this poem. This is a memory that he keeps coming back to in a circular form. Really clever use of round to remind us of that. Okay, now we come to the casual choice of language, which we could call colloquial. The language that you would use with friends. So one of my mates, and he goes by, instead of describing what he actually does, which is bend over the body. He does this in order to try and go by himself. He doesn't want to stop at the body. He doesn't want to stop at this memory, but actually he has to. And then we've got this casual action, which is a juxtaposition with the horror of what's being described, and tosses his guts back into his body. And hopefully you've made a note of that subject terminology that's going to get you the grades, the colloquial language and the juxtaposition, that structural feature. We're now going to add sibilance to that, the repetition of the S sound here, which emphasizes this casual action, and it also creates that sinister mood to something that the narrator is trying to pass off as normal, but actually horrifies us, tosses his guts. Now, another interesting thing about this is that it sounds like a metaphor. To toss your guts is to be sick, and this alludes to the fact that this soldier is now feeling sick, remembering this incident, whereas at the time it was simply a casual moment, as reflected by the casual and colloquial imagery and language. Now we come back to the present. The soldier is back at home as he delivers this monologue, and he says, and the drink and the drugs won't flush him out. So we have powerful sense of repetition here, which suggests that he keeps turning to drink and he keeps turning to drugs, whether for depression or whether self-medicating with class A drugs, we don't know. But we can see that he's built an addiction which is based on trying to escape this memory, and that of course represents the memories of war. Now Armitage here, you must understand, is not just describing one individual. He is describing one individual's experience in detail, but he's making a much wider political point. He's saying that these experiences remain with the soldiers when they return. And we know it's just not this one soldier that he's writing about, because at the beginning he pointed it out to us with on another occasion. So this has happened a lot, and obviously every time they're on patrol with other soldiers having exactly the same experiences. So this one soldier represents all our soldiers. Right, we now have this metaphor here of him being flushed out. Now here, Armitage is using the language that soldiers would use to expose an enemy. So you'd flush the enemy out of their hiding place, therefore you'd be able to see them and shoot them and eliminate the threat. So that's why he's using this language at the first instance. However, it also has different associations for us. To flush is obviously what we do with the toilet. And we've got the idea here then of excrement. So this image in his head is like excrement that he wants to flush away. He wants to get rid of it. Now this allusion to excrement also works another way, because this is now how he sees himself. It's not the image necessarily that is the excremental vision, it's his part in it, what he did, which we're going to see in our final quotation at the end of the poem. So he's now making a judgment on himself, which leads us to believe he now believes he is worthless. The soldier is filled with not just guilt and remorse, but self-disgust. And we get that from this metaphor of flushing him out. And we also get that from the repetitive patterns of addicted behaviour with drink and drugs, where he's trying to cure himself of this view of himself, and of course it doesn't work. So now we come to the end of the poem and his final admission of his own guilt. We'll make a structural feature here in that it ends with hands, which refers back to the rhyme of sand and land. Now, if we had a kind of completeness here, a happy ending, he would be ending with a rhyming couplet. But instead, the rhyming couplet is here describing the dead looter. But his own ending does not rhyme. It shows discordance. Another bit of subject terminology for you there, which means that the sounds do not fit. And he also emphasizes that with the S at the end of hands, so that it doesn't quite rhyme with sand and land as well. So it shows his lack of control, which is important, because at the end we have to decide, is this a soldier who is now having a lack of control about his own life? Is he going to commit suicide? Well, now let's delve into the imagery and get an answer to that question. So this final reference, the looter's bloody life in my bloody hands, is a clear literary allusion again, and it's referring to the bloody hands of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And the blood in that play, as you probably know, represents their guilt at killing the king. And Armitage is using that literary allusion to suggest that the looter's life was just as precious as a king's, and the consequence of killing him is probably going to be just as tragic as it was with the Macbeths. We also pick up a change in the personal pronouns here, because it's now his life, but it's in my hands. So now he sees himself as the guilty party. Now, at the beginning of the poem, everything was centred on collective responsibility. It was we, it was my mates. And in the rest of the poem that I haven't analysed, you'll see we crops up all the time. But now he recognises that it is him. So again, that gives him a motive for self-destruction and potential suicide. There is a potential level of hope there, because now he has accepted his own responsibility. Perhaps he can cure himself. His previous attempts to cure himself with drink and drugs are not working. But this asks us to think, who is he now speaking to? If it is to a reporter, then this sounds like a confession and he may end up committing suicide. However, if it is to an army medical staff, to a psychologist, then perhaps he is getting a cure. And the first step towards that cure is accepting and understanding what he's done. So this poem itself could be the turning point to saving him, or it could be the final turning point to him ending his life. Now, these two choices are emphasized throughout the poem and also in this couplet. So the harsh sound of bloody repeated here, that repetition emphasizes his guilt, but the emphasis on the here and now suggests that he might be able to stay in the present. He might be able to escape thoughts of committing suicide in the future. Alternatively, this here and now is the memory he's suffering, and therefore he won't be able to cope with that level of guilt and suffering and will kill himself. It's important when you write about this poem not to decide one way or the other. You can do, by the way, but what's going to get you the marks is telling us how we're invited to decide for ourselves which of those two possibilities is going to occur. And we can pick on this metaphor near to the knuckle, which traditionally means it's almost breaking a taboo. It's breaking a social convention, which he is here. He's breaking the social convention of soldiers being brave, and he's giving in to his own fears. But we can flip that and look at its opposite. Near the knuckle, we can imagine a fist, and it's a reference to how he's going to continue to fight this guilt, and perhaps he is seeking help through his confession, which will save him. Now, hopefully you can see that by concentrating on the form at the beginning and then the soldier's point of view at the beginning and how that changes towards the end will give you a really strong argument in your essay and is plenty to get you the very top grades. Go back over this and see where I've made points about structure, where I've talked about language features, which is the subject terminology I've given you. And once you get used to using that, grade 7 and above will come easy. If you like this new shorter style of poetry analysis, please give the videos a like, or even better, give me a comment below. And as usual, subscribe if you want more, and see you soon on my channel. Thank you very much.